Just when I decide to soften a bit on Microsoft and Xbox's strategy going forward, Shuhei Yoshida gives an interview and pretty much confirms all of the things that I've been saying when it comes to Sony and the audience that they cultivated that will only purchase the AAA high-cost budgeted Sony first-party title. It's almost like the audience that Xbox cultivated, the audience that won't purchase a la carte games, but rather would subscribe to Game Pass. That's seen as a negative, but what is it when you have an audience that won't accept anything other than a large AAA high-budget game that takes years and years and years to break even on, and eventually you get the remaster, remake on the next generation's hardware 2 or 3 times before that studio then makes their next game on that system? That strategy cannot continue. And I think one thing is clear after seeing all of the money wasted on these live service games that have either been canceled or delayed indefinitely. Sony is having an identity crisis. The interview that Shuhei Yoshida gave was very telling. In it, he says that he was removed from his position. Now, that's a lot different than retiring. I don't know anyone that retired that goes on to talk about being removed from a position. So it's clear that there was some sort of internal struggle happening at Sony when Herman Hulst was given the position. And Yoshida decided that probably chasing something that they weren't known for versus not going after the things that they are known for was probably going to lead to a mistake and a misalignment of the company. And here we are, years and years later. He's talking about PSVR 2 and saying, can we just move on? He's talking about the high cost of chasing these live service games at the expense of anything creative and just really exceptional and not samey when compared to other games in the genre that they're trying to make in these big single-player games. His view was, in order to be PlayStation, they have to be PlayStation. They have to take these risks with these inherently creative new ideas. And in a world where they're playing this high-cost game with Microsoft and acquiring really expensive components for new generation systems and spending $300 and $400 million per game that only releases once a generation, takes about 5 or 6 years to even release, and again, eventually get that remaster or remake into the next generation, this is something that I've seen coming. And I'm not sure how Sony can adjust to this, or even if they feel like they should at this point. Like I said, it seems like there's this internal identity crisis happening within Sony right now. Do they continue to chase this forever game, this live service game, after getting a taste of success with Helldivers 2 and then a fountain of failure with everything else? Or do they try and position themselves as this really high-end boutique AAA manufacturer where you get one game every generation, takes too long for a content to come out, costs too much, it's just not going to work for them. So what do they do next? Something that I think their fans simply won't allow. And that's redefine their relationship to the costs in the game that they're in with Microsoft. Maybe you don't get the most advanced next-gen system, but it's just powerful enough to give Sony creators the canvas that they need and third parties, and it puts them profitable day one. But like I said, fans will not accept anything other than the highest of the high-end new generation system for no longer $500, but probably $600 or $700, and they certainly won't pay more than $70 for these hugely budgeted games because, they want everything. They want Sony to continue to be Sony, continue to incur all these costs, and still give them $70 AAA, hugely budgeted video games. Not going to happen. Sony is in a pickle. They're in a world where in certain regions, Helldivers 2 outsells Spider-Man 2, one of their highly budgeted AAA games. A lot of people like to point out the cost, the tremendous cost that Xbox incurred with publishers that they purchased. And of course, that's a tremendous cost, and that cost has to be mitigated in some way. And having multiple avenues for those pieces of software to earn actual revenue was the only way Microsoft could justify doing this. And the only way to mitigate those costs was by passing them on to other player bases like the PlayStation and the Switch audience. Sony is in a pickle because they can't do that. Their fans simply won't allow it. And if you don't think Sony is looking at all the money that Helldivers 2 is making, and if you don't think that means pretty much everything's going to PC, especially the big budgeted intergalactic single-player AAA game day and date on PC, you're crazy. And their subscription service may be eyeing some more exclusive first-party content to bolster that subscription base too, to mitigate all of those costs. Once you just relax your social media warped sense of what's going on, the constant negativity, the constant this is better than this, you'll see that Sony is in the same game as Microsoft. They refuse to step out of it. It's this high cost of everything that they're doing that you have to have a home run with right out of the gate that just cannot sustain itself unless Sony either changes the nature of what AAA is to themselves and their fans, put themselves in a position to be profitable day one with hardware that isn't super expensive. None of that's going to happen because of the fan base. Again, the fan base that's been cultivated to only buy AAA games from Sony, much like the critique of the Microsoft and Xbox audience not buying a la carte games being a problem. Well, Microsoft figured out how to mitigate these costs to create a cadence of releases like you're seeing coming up for Xbox and Game Pass. And with Sony and PlayStation, we're still waiting on Naughty Dog to produce one PlayStation 5 game, and we're still waiting on Sucker Punch to produce Ghost of Yotai, their first PlayStation 5 game this entire generation. This cannot continue. It will not continue. Sony is at a crossroads, and I'm interested to see if they decide to go a little bit more like Nintendo, a little bit more insulated from everyone else and costs. Interested if their audience would even accept that, but I don't think that they will. And I think you're going to see Sony becoming much more like Microsoft. I think you're going to see games on PC day and date. Now, I don't think that's going to affect PlayStation console gamers because most console gamers don't care about PC at all. They just want to play it on a console. But I do think Sony's going to have to find a way to make the idea of games day and date on other platforms like the PC and maybe even the Xbox in the future, and the idea of these huge budgeted AAA games being something different is going to be a hard pill for the cultivated boutique PlayStation audience to swallow. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Thanks for watching this video. Think about liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video.